Let's talk about this Joe Rogan, Neil Young thing. I feel bad, please. Joe. I'm sorry that they constantly drag your name in this stuff, but let's be real. I mean, Joe runs the biggest show when it comes to politics and culture, probably in the world. It's the biggest podcast in the world, but in this space, he dominates, and thus he's always going to be. He's on top of the mountain. He's going to be the target of this stuff. And as we enter 2022, the midterm elections, it's critical for the establishment to push back on people like Joe. So we have this ridiculous story where Neil Young, who is an aging rocker who is not relevant, he's 76, he sent a letter to his manager saying that either Spotify removes Joe Rogan or removes all of his music. Apparently he deleted the letter and quickly backed down because Spotify was like, let me see here. 4 of your songs have broken 100 million listens, and the 5th one is at 73. It's Keep on Rocking in the Free World. Good song, by the way. Hey, I respect Neil Young for his music. But Joe Rogan gets 11 million every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So 4 times a week. Yeah. In a month, he's going to be, in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months, he's just massively outperforming what Neil Young could ever produce. But this is the crazy thing. That it's absolutely insane to me that you have these, the way I described it earlier, Neil Young's the protest guy. He's supposed to oppose the establishment. And here he is being like, we got to protect CNN. We got to protect the mainstream media. It's remarkable to me. You know what it says to me is that a lot of these people, I mentioned Barry Weiss and Bill Maher, and I keep doing it, and probably should move on, but these people know full well how bad the system was. They know people are suffering, but they don't care because it's their market. They're not willing to challenge the establishment until, the polls shift in favor of, the polls shift against Joe Biden. Rasmussen comes out and says the average voter thinks the media's the enemy of the people. And all of a sudden they're like, actually, I've always agreed and I've always sided with the independent voices.
I don't think schools should have been shut down at all. No. Yeah.
You see what Bill Maher said when he was like, Fauci, you can't just tell us what to do in your lab coat. It's like, Bill, that was in November of 2020. Fauci said that. So they know full well. But I have this article here from CNN on purpose. I love CNN. You guys know that. It's Neil Young's free world, not Joe Rogan's. Remarkable. It's opinion by Jill. What is it? Filipovich.
Filipovich. Yep.
Filipovich. So what is this? Jill Filipovich is a journalist. Based in New York, the author of Okay Boomer, Let's Talk: How My Generation Got Left Behind. Is she a boomer? She basically writes about this, and it's funny because it's not Neil Young's world. He backed down. He lost. Joe Rogan's winning. You can't stop it. This is where we're at.
So Neil retracted his
He deleted the letter, and his music is all still there.
Oh.
I think he realized that he has no leverage. I'm willing to bet he thought, I'm famous. I got big music. I'll come out and I'll demand they ban Joe Rogan for misinformation, and then they will. And Spotify was like, shut up, old man.
Right. Like, he didn't look at this ahead of time. Like, someone told him, there's this guy we got to get rid of. You got to come out and threaten to take your music somewhere else. You got to choose, and it didn't work out at all for them. It flamed out. And even just from the numbers perspective that you were talking about, that's stunning. Those numbers, there's no argument. There's no debate about that. Speaking of facts, in truth, that is a fact.
I bet he thought that a bunch of other musicians were going to step up with him and be
Right.
like, yeah, I'm signing that down. Hundreds of thousands of millions of views. Let's take it off kind of thing.
Right, yeah. He thought that he could somehow join forces with Spotify employees that are triggered by alternative opinions from Joe Rogan.
I'll be honest. I'm willing to bet Joe hasn't even thought twice about any of this.
Oh, no.
But I like to believe that he's sitting there with his fingers crossed, being like, please, Spotify, break my $100 million contract.
Oh, yeah.
So that I can get paid out instantly and then host my show wherever I want.
Well, and I should point out about Jill. In the past, she said during one of the presidential cycles that white men should not be allowed to run for office again, among other things.
Yikes.
And
Jill should not be allowed to write for CNN again.
Right.
Yeah,
and,
really.
and she's also recently talked about how a lot of these SCOTUS cases, the current Supreme Court, is terrifying to her. So, yeah,
Is she traumatized?
Is she traumatized? Does she need,
You saw when Brian Stelter was talking about that?
She needs a snowflake.
Journalists who got traumatized from January 6th. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to me that, the way people feel. You know what? The mainstream media is threatened by Joe. He's taken over. He's dominating the space. Long form podcasts like his, like ours, are growing and growing and growing because they're more authentic. we have politicians on this show. It's very difficult for them to lie or weasel their way out of things. We're gonna have some politicians in the show.
Yes, we are.
And I commend them for being brave enough to come on, because I think we had who was it, Carrie Lake?
Yeah.
And Ian asked her about owning rocket launchers.
Yeah.
And
like,
DMT
well.
and like just like conversations. And you know what I can't stand? I can't stand when you're like watching Obama and they were doing this thing with him where he answered questions on Reddit or something, and it's like very clearly they go and they pick 10 very clean and very basic questions to answer. No. I want Carrie to answer the question about owning a rocket launcher.
Yeah, and psychedelics,
DMT.
man. The psychedelic thing is super important for our leaders to be talking about right now. You can't you can look away from that as long as you want, but it's a huge part of humanity, and it needs to be addressed politically.
Authenticity, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and this goes to the other point that I see a lot with journalists, and we saw this a lot with Biden's press conference last week. Journalists ask these such, I don't know, unimaginative questions. It's so pedantic after like 5 seconds. And a lot of it is questions that everyone knows the answer to.
Yep.
Biden has already stated his opinion about X. Jen Psaki has already stated her opinion about this. But, they want their soundbite and they want to ask the president for yet another time. Though, the only point I will give them is with Joe Biden, who knows, he may change his mind if you catch him at the right time and his brain is not properly wired for that day and his script is not up to date.
You know what I can't handle anymore is the PR responses we know are fake. The questions from journalists we know are fake. I just don't care. I don't understand how there was a generation of people, boomers, and to a certain degree Gen X, who were like actually sit there, attentive to a spokesman for an oil company after an oil spill when they're going to lie. When the questions are going to be boring, basic, well, they do sponsor the show, so we got to be very careful, but we do need to ask these questions. And I'm just like, why would I waste my time listening to that?
It's kind of like if you're going for a family trip. This metaphor came into my mind, and you're sitting in the back seat, you're a kid, and your dad's driving. But then all of a sudden, in the middle of the trip, your dad starts screaming at everyone in the car, and you're like, well, I have two options. I can sit in the car and take it and then get to where I want to go, this joyous thing I was promised, or I can get out of the car and try and find my own way halfway across the country as a 9-year-old. So these people watching the media are like on the ride. They've been sold an American dream, and they think that if they sit here and take it, they're going to get there. They're going to be taken to this promised land. That's not the way things work. Yes. They've been manipulated the whole time.
The guy who sat in his basement watching, as Ben Shapiro said, eating oatmeal and watching Matlock. You really think that guy was going to do it for you? It's really astounding, and they're flailing. They're flailing because they don't have anyone. Joe Biden's not going to come to the rescue. Kamala Harris certainly isn't going to come to their rescue. If not, it would arguably be even worse. And they don't have the orator that Barack Obama was to at least make them feel good.
Barack Obama knew how to speak for sure, and he knew how to weasel through questions and things like that. I will say that this administration is so insane that actually the questions to Jen Psaki are great. Even as boring and as lame as they can be. Like when Biden recently said that he thought the midterm would be illegitimate, Jen Psaki's response is, actually, he was talking about Trump. He was criticizing Trump. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're like, dude, we heard what he said. You're just lying now, making the whole thing worse. But I'm glad she's lying because now it's becoming so obvious to everybody. These are canned responses with canned questions, and it is a waste of your time to pay attention to these people.
Right, and that's one of my beats actually for Newsbusters. I watched Joy Reid's show and I watched the White House press briefing, and some of the questions are pretty boring and straightforward. But I have been surprised on certain days how, even basic questions that journalists ask elicit such horrible responses from Jen Psaki or whichever special guest that she has on, especially somebody like Jake Sullivan or John Kerry. It is truly astounding how terrible it is. And journalists, you would say, it's kind of just a whatever question, but it ends up sounding like an amazing question because their response is just so terrible to these questions. And they constantly have to clean up for themselves. So they're not even trying to set traps for them. It's not even a trap, and they're somehow falling in.
I remember this moment when the Deepwater Horizon thing happened. I was working for these nonprofits. There's a big oil spill. I was in LA at the time. And the response you get from these companies is just like, you learn nothing. They say nothing. It is as generic can be, and they may have well have said they might as well have just said nothing because there was no point in issuing these canned responses. You know, we recently had the CEO of Getter on the show, and we were talking about how they banned this dude, and he couldn't give me a straight answer, and he kept talking in circles, and finally I'm just like, dude, this is BS. You know, I actually swore at the time, but we'll keep it family friendly today. And I was just like, I don't want to be involved in that kind of show. I don't want to sit here and talk to people. So, you know, this is obviously why people like longer form podcasts. It's obviously why they like Joe Rogan's show. I don't even think it's necessarily about Joe Rogan, to be completely honest. I think he was first in and best dressed. Mm-hmm. And that helped him. I mean, he's a famous comedian. He's a funny guy. That really works for him. He's clearly talented. But I think for the most part, it's he basically, you know, kickstarts this format of sitting down with prominent people in a raw scenario where they can't just avoid the questions because he's going to be like, I asked you a question, bro, give me an answer. Not always, but often. Because you're sitting here. You want to get up and leave in the middle of the show? That'll look even worse. What are you going to do? In a segment like CNN where they give you 4 minutes, it's really easy to patter your way out of a hard question. Inflation is hitting. What will you do? Look, we got a lot of problems in this country that we're going to be dealing with. And we're out of time. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Right. Or they're on a panel with 10 other people.
Yeah.
And so you get to speak once. So all told, by the time you add up the amount of speaking time you had, maybe a minute, if that. Yeah. Or it becomes a shouting match where there's a ton of crosstalk and nobody can understand what is being said.
I've gotten invited onto Fox News fairly often as of recent. And I was kind of like, sure, whatever, I guess. It's like a couple minutes. And I was surprised how well those clips do on YouTube. I think getting like, a million or something views on some of them. And then after a while, I was just like, there's no point in trying to speed talk my way through a 3-minute segment. And I just do my show. And maybe it's good because a lot of people say like, get as much airtime as possible, get on these shows. I don't know, man. It's just, I'm so sick of the inauthenticity. Just the fake, like pre-planned conversations. Here's what we're going to ask you about. Think about your answer. And it's just like, I don't know, man. I want real conversations. I want to know what's actually going on. I think that's what people want too.
I think people want, and even some of us just want all of the above, to be able to have that option to look at the digestible news that you can read, for example, takes you 10 minutes, or see a really quick like YouTube story, or like hear, news and headlines on, a Sirius XM channel, and also be able to have access to longer form conversations. And it's possible because of the internet and social media. That's the reason this show is doing as well as it is, and other shows as well, because people have a thirst for that. They have a thirst for conversation and nuance and, just all kinds of opinions.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.